Welcome back to another episode of the Erickson Brothers Podcast, where we talk about the questions we do not know the answers to and the possible returns of life's investments. I am your co-host, Jeff Erickson, here with my older brother, Matt Erickson, coming to you today from sunny San Diego. Matt, how you doing, bro?
Good. I'm good. It's good to be on. We haven't had a convo in a while, so looking forward to it today.
Yeah, we haven't had a recorded Zoom convo in a while, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's good to be back in the saddle and back recording our thoughts in a more organized place. But everything's been going well.
Yeah, yeah. I've been a few places. I was in Europe for 2 weeks with work, and then vacation, and then for the fourth I was in Maine. Uh so been traveling a little bit, which has led to our inconsistency here. And I know you've been doing that as well.
Mhm.
So I've got some questions for you once you share about your stories, but
Yeah, I'll
love to hear a recap.
I'll pepper you on Europe questions and then we can flip roles. Does that sound good?
Well, I've got a question about a conversation I had um, in
Okay.
Maine.
All right,
Yeah.
let's jump right in.
Yep. So one of the guys I talked to, um, he was in the army for 20 years and he made his way up to general. And then he retired from the army and had a career in banking for 20 years.
Whoa.
So I asked him about his what he thought of the Jocko Willink and the David Goggins people who kind of use this their platform from being in the military and these high rankings, and now they're leveraging it into social media, because I think there's some talk from people in the military that like this is very like sacred. There's somewhat some secrecy to it, and like to leverage your experience on TikTok doesn't really line up with like the Navy SEALs. Like there, some people think there's
Yeah,
kind of a mismatch there. Um,
I think that's fair.
and so I asked him like, okay, like what's your what's your take on that? And he was like, you know what, I don't really mind. I think people have a story and they can share it and whatever it is. So I asked him, I was like, so like Jocko, he's got his one story that he recycles a lot of the time about his squadron uh, in Afghanistan or Iraq, like having the friendly fire. Um, and I was like, so what is your story that you have from being in the military? I'm sure you have lots, but that what's one that seems to come up a lot and then you like to share with people, and what have you learned? So his story was back when he was a captain. So he said he was 27 or 28, and a general was talking to him about um, the a general at the time was giving him orders on um, pretty much skipping a necessary step that was needed to be done in surveying the land so helicopters could fly over at night. They want to know where hills are and where um, telephone poles and things like that. So they want to know necessary elevation changes and potential buildings and things like that. So helicopters are appropriately uh, versed in the geography of the land. So what he told me that there was some skip step in the process, and the general was telling his name was Rob. The general was telling Rob to skip this step, and he ended up standing up for the rules and in the process. Um, but also in that is that one of the people that would have had their safety directly impacted by this step being skipped overheard the conversation and was able to um, uh, admire Rob for sticking up for them and sticking up for the process. So what Rob was telling me is that his takeaways from that is just that having integrity in all situations and being able to stick up for yourself and stick up for others um, when it might not be needed, or no matter how large or how small. He talked about the integrity that is needed, and um, he said along with that, just having the confidence to voice what's right and voice your voice what's right, and know that we're all human. There's going to be times when people are uh, lapsing in judgment, and it's important to hold each other accountable in those times, so we don't cut any corners or anything like that. So
Yeah.
um,
Wow.
yeah, I don't have anything specific with that, but just thought it was a cool thing. And
Do you
so
think
now,
do you think there's necessarily an equivalent at your work, or is it just like, just always following the system, always following procedure, like holding up the process over a
mhm.
specific direction? Do you think it's a one-to-one correlation, or do you think it might be applicable different in the business
Yeah,
world?
I think there always is instances of um, times you can act with integrity. Like for me, I feel like that just going through certain processes we have, like you might be able to skip a corner or whatever once, but that's going to hurt the next person who comes along. Um, if you're not doing things the right way, it might be okay that time, but it'll it'll hurt the person behind you that's trying to execute. Um, and I think that for me, I've learned that as in like uh, do something right once, or do it wrong, and or else you'll be doing it wrong multiple times after that. Um, and I
Yeah.
think like the the direct correlation for I guess another takeaway for me and just work, and I've attributed to life is like I don't know that I'm sure in everybody's work, but especially in finance, like there's like you're transferring information a lot, and sometimes there's a lot of copying and pasting into old formats into new formats, and I don't know, it's just grunt work of going from one Excel to another, one PowerPoint to another PowerPoint, blah blah blah. But if you copy and paste something wrong, you then need to change it twice. You then need to correct it twice. But if
Mm,
you correct it first before you copy and paste it, then you only need to correct it once the first time. Um, and it's just the importance of doing it right the first time, and doing it right before you copy paste, copy paste, copy paste.
yeah.
There's definitely benefits to expediting work like that. But making sure something's done right the first time has been something that, like, even though it's the direct example that I learned is legitimately from like things like Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel, like not advanced things at all, but just the principle of make sure it's right the first time before you expand or copy and paste over, and things like that.
No, that's good. That reminds me of a topic that I've been learning in business, which is having a very strong personal example of what you've been doing, and like setting a strong example of talking with clients as yourself, especially as you're building a business and you're building a team, because people are going to look up to you as you're building a team. They're going to look up to you for what they have to do. And if you're not personally getting new clients and you're not personally talking with people and getting in the field, then they don't have an example of what that even looks like. And I'll share something with you. Is like there's a guy on my team that came to me and he goes like, man, I just can't get anyone to do anything. I just can't, I'm not successful right now. Like I can't get anyone on my team to take any action. And I'm like, you know what? They're just being really coachable. And he was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, they're just doing exactly what you're doing. I'm like, they're just being coachable to you. And because you're not taking action, because you're not in the field, they're just listening to exactly what it is that you're doing. And it was kind of like a shot to him. And I try to say it in a nice way, but why it made me think of this is because, people are going to do what you do, or like when you're almost duplicating something or training somebody on something or copying and pasting something in the business world, it's so important for that master copy to be a
Mm-hmm.
master copy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's that's a good point, and I think that's true in life. I think as like m- people of faith too, that's very important
Oh,
when you're
that's good.
when you're discipling people and a new believer or somebody who doesn't is looking for an example. Um, like as Christians, we're called to a higher reproach, right? And we're
Hmm.
called to be we're called to a higher standard because we know when if we're trying to get somebody to believe in this guy that died 2,000 years ago as a way of life, as a reason to redirect somebody's eternity, like
Yeah.
we want to be able to stick up for things we do, and we want to have truth and value to those things. So if you don't, if you might be acting one way on one day, but then the next day you're going and doing something else, then that's not, you're not being a good witness. And no, nobody's perfect. We all fall short of the glory of God every single day. But the acknowledgement of sin, but also the correction is important in the Christian walk. Um, and I think at the end of the day, like the master copy is not like, it's not Biden, it's not Shohei Ohtani, it's not LeBron James, it's not any one person. It's Jesus Christ, and I think
Come on.
that's the another point too here is like there's going to be people with shortcomings who are prideful or are, you know, um not and they're no, nobody's perfect, right? But we do know who that one person who did live a perfect life is, and we can model our life after that.
Yeah.
um
My favorite definition of a leader of all time is a do it first leader. Right. And I
mhm.
think I've heard people talk about this like, oh, do what I say, not as I do, right? Like giving that as advice. I think that's the most BS
I think
advice
that's a joke
ever.
though.
Yeah,
I think when people
I
say that,
hope.
that's more of like a that's more satire than anything.
Well, just going off of that, like, it's so important when you tell someone to do something or you tell someone to believe in a specific way or to change their way of life, like it has to
Mhm,
come from a place that you've done it before. Like you've done
mhm,
it, you've experienced it. Like the convinced will be convincing. You can't
mhm,
transfer something to somebody if you're not first experiencing yourself. Like you can't transfer a faith in God and a faith in Jesus if you first don't have that faith yourself. So
mhm.
so good. And I didn't draw the connection to spirituality, but I think that's spot on.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, we've talked about broader stuff, but I think that in another recent conversation I had, and I think I've brought this up. Um, I asked him like, if you stood before God right now on a scale of 1 to 10, what are the one being not sure and 10 being very sure? Where do you think you'd rank yourself getting into heaven? And this guy goes, uh, probably a 2 right now. I don't think I'm a very good person at the moment. And I said, "Oh, do good people get into heaven?" And he goes, "No." And I was like, "Okay, so why would God let anybody into heaven?" And he goes, "Well, because of grace and mercy." And I was like, "Right, because of what Jesus did on the cross." So I asked him again, "So did God die? Did Jesus die for 20% of your sins? Is that why you said 2?" And he goes, "No, I guess maybe it's a little bit better, so it's like an 8. I go, did,
You're missing the point here, bro.
Did Jesus die for 80% of your sins? Like, what if you were to get into heaven, if you were to stand before God right now, and he was to say, 10 being sure, 1 being not so sure, what would you say your chances of getting into heaven? And then he finally said 10. And the second question that is oftentimes asked with this question is like, okay, why would I let you in? And if it's a 10, right, it's nothing of what we've done, but of what Jesus did. So it
Yeah.
it
Well,
I've heard those questions before from those aren't my questions. I just have taken those questions. But I have I I asked them to somebody recently, and that was the first time I'd done that, and it was that was the conversation. But I left the conversation, or he left the conversation with a very like renewed outlook. Because he considered himself a Christian, but you know, people are inherently bad people, and that's why we have this thing called Christianity, and thankfully we can put our faith in something else other than ourselves.
having confidence in your eternity, that's like the most important thing ever, at least in my opinion. Like, if you don't have confidence in your eternity, like that would, for me, that would bring me a lot of anxiety. I'd have a lot of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
My life would be up and down. Like, I wouldn't have anything to stand on. One trouble or one adversity comes in my life, or one spiritual battle comes into my life, like I'm completely blown off course. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, I think that you have to have, and like for people listening on this call, like you have to have an unwavering faith that you're going into heaven, and like the path that you're on is going to lead you to eternity with Jesus. And it's like it can't be a sliding scale either. It's not like there's different levels to this. It's like you're either in or you're um completely separate. So,
Mm-hmm.
man, that is a big, and if you don't know those answers on the call, like that is big. That's something to really wrestle with and like really figure out for yourself. Like how confident are you that you're going to heaven? Big deal.
Yeah, and I think it's not just knowing the answers; it's truly believing that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then after, and like that not being the finish line, that being the starting point of, okay, where do I go from here? Like, if I believe that there's this God that died 2,000 years ago, like, let's go read about him and let's go figure out all that we can about him.
Yeah. That's the ticket into the arena, you know.
Mhm, mhm.
Now it's time to play.
Have you seen Inside Out 2?
I have. Kayla and I watched it. Pretty good.
Could you tell me what the premise is?
Yeah. So, um, the hockey player girl, she's starting in high school,
Hmm.
and basically her friends leave her. Here's my synopsis. Her friends leave her, and it's kind of like an identity shift that she has because her friends are going to a different high school, and that's like all she knows. And now she's starting high school all by herself. And then on top of that, there's like the five core emotions. There's like
Hmm.
happiness, sadness, worry, I don't know, like anger.
Anger, yeah.
Yeah, those like the five core emotions. But she hits puberty um, right when high school starts, and like her identity shifts, but also five new emotions come in. And it's like anxiety and depression and loneliness and doubt and all of these. So it's five new emotional characters come in, and because our identity shift, they almost like lose the five core emotions, like lose control of the operating system, and these new
Hmm.
emotions basically like take charge of it, like ambush it, so to speak, and then start controlling her based on these new emotions. And it's basically a big fight. And one emotion comes and saves the day. One of the five core emotions comes and saves the day and takes back over her identity. And that's basically it.
And what was happening in the hockey player's life that led to
So
these emotions?
she went to hockey camp, and she had the choice of being able to and it was basically like a hockey camp tryout. So like it was a sleepaway camp, and she was in a new environment, and she was trying out for a team, and she wrapped her whole identity around whether or not she made the team. So it was like a lot of self-doubt and anxiousness and loneliness. And then also like she was changing who she was to try to impress people that were already on the team. And she was like throwing her old friends under the bus, and like, wasn't really being a good friend there. And, like looking in the coach's office and like doing some, shady stuff to see if she actually was on the roster, what the coach thought of her. And so it was like outside, it was whether she's going to make the team or not, which wrapped her identity. And on the inside, it was these new emotions coming in when she faced a puberty, and it was kind of like the symbolism between that.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I haven't seen it,
Yeah,
but
it was good. I won't spoil it. It was good. I think you and Haley should watch it.
yeah, I haven't seen it, but one of my coworkers saw it, and her reaction to it, or what she told me about the initial reactions from the public, and people are like, "Oh, that's like way too harsh. Like that's not really like anxiety and depression like that. Like it's just like that's way too much for what actually happens." And then my coworker was like, "No, like that's just life. Like this is what happens." And like people get anxious and they get, I don't know what the other words, but she was using, the my coworker was using like the main one is like anxiety as the one who was like perpetually at the front now. Um and I think she was saying how accurate it is, and I believe her that a lot of people today are anxious. And I think it's just like so sad, right? That like this movie is something that so many people identify with as
I
like
mean,
this
it's
is
just
what's going on in
it
their
broke
head.
box office records for the year, right?
Right. And it comes back to like where is my identity, and where like with like it uncovers like so many things that people have, but um like thankfully anxiety is not something I deal with, and that could be just a factor of like who I am and my brain chemistry, but I also like find confidence in what we've been talking about, and like the identity and like who Jesus is and what he did, and not anything else. And I think that like there's just there's something missing, and there's always been something missing in people's hearts and minds. And like now this movie is able to like capture what it is, and like it personifies these emotions that people have that are so frequent, but like the um it's just sad to think that like this is what
Yeah.
people go through. And people are looking for different things, and like depression's up, anxiety's up, use of social media is up, like people have no idea where to turn. And it's it's sad, but like that's just like where we're at. And it just proves a need for um like a true rock
Yeah.
in in people's lives. So that's why I ask about that. I think there's some correlation, but
Yeah. No, it was good. I definitely recommend watching it. And it was like entertaining. I mean, there's a reason why, it's the top of the charts right now. And I thought Inside Out was like one of the best cartoon movies I'd seen. Like the first one was one of the best cartoon movies I'd ever seen. They just, it's so well done, and it's a complete shift, and it's relatable, and it's from a different perspective, and it's like there's some aspects of humor to it. So it's good.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah. All right. So tell me the countries that you've been in the last 30 days.
30 days. The Netherlands, Belgium, France, Monaco, the United States.
In that order,
Uh, roughly.
roughly. Um, cool. Tell me about the Netherlands. What was like one standout thing that
Um,
that maybe surprised you or like that you remember most from the culture?
yeah, well, I was there with work. Um, so we were in a few small towns outside of Amsterdam, and uh, which was good. There's our global team of 80 people. I think we were at this hotel and at our headquarters and stuff. One of the towns I visited was this town called Nijmegen, which is spelled Nijmegen, and it was heavily bombed during World War II.
Oh,
So
whoa.
there were and there were subsequent battles at that town. Like they bombed a bridge and um, a few of the buildings. So I was there with just my buddy before the work event, and he was showing me like he was showing me like, oh, like this block was bombed, this one wasn't, this block was bombed, and you can see that where the where the bombs had landed, where there's all these like new buildings, and then where they hadn't, there were these old buildings. Um, and then there's like a cannon and blockades in the town. So all these like actual World War II history in the town of Nijmegen, because it's really close to Germany. So it was the first time I was on the ground of a World War II battle. Um, and
Was
it's
that
just
wow.
really interesting to think that it was really not that long ago. 80 years, like
Did you ever see anything like that in Japan or no?
we went to Hiroshima, which
Was it
is,
similar or
I
no?
mean, I mean, Japan was completely wiped out
Ah, because of the nuke.
by the bomb. So like it was a lot. It was like all new buildings, right? And
Ah,
like
ah.
they like when Hiroshima got bombed, like they had a chance to like completely reset and rethink architecture and city grids and plumbing and city urban planning. So it was a really cool place to be, Japan in general. But when when it's in mostly the Europe at World War II is very localized, um, and nuclear bombs were not used in Europe. So you had these pockets of areas. Um, so it was just really interesting to see, and that you remember that this stuff happened not too long ago. Another takeaway, I mean, Amsterdam is known for, what would you say?
I would say the red light district.
Right. So I asked some of the coworkers that lived in Amsterdam. I'm like, what's the deal with this? Like it's this thing that the whole world knows is like the place to Amsterdam is like the place to go to party and see legitimate prostitution and like these things that are just
Legalized like other drugs too, like shrooms and some other.
right. So it's just like a very um indulgent place.
Mm-hmm.
And um so I asked my coworkers, like, what's the deal? Like, why, like, is this a thing that Dutch people go to? And he's like, oh no, it's just a tourist thing. Like, if you are Dutch, you really avoid the city center, which is where the red light district is, and the farther out from the city center, is, the less touristy it is and the less wild it is. So most Dutch people hang around this like these two outer rings that aren't in the city center where the red light district is, but more suburban, um, urban places that aren't touristy, like you have in all these other cities. But he said that like a lot of the Dutch people are just like it's not a thing that's a normal Dutch person does. Like the people I talked to, they said, "Oh, I don't know anybody that's ever gone." So I'm like, so why is it this thing that is allowed? Like that. If Dutch people
Yeah.
don't agree with it, then and the world looks at it like as like this horrible. I mean, the world doesn't look like it at it as a horrible thing. I look at it
But
as
it's
just
like it's almost their identity.
right. Well, that's the perceived identity, but
Yeah.
when you talk to actual Dutch people, that's not what it is at all.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, what's like, why doesn't Amsterdam, like the government, change it if there's trying to be a change? Well, they're like, well, tourism, blah, blah, blah. Not a huge deal. And like, I think I don't know if it's a European mindset or I won't put a word to it, but it's like, oh, if it doesn't bother me, then I will let them do whatever they want to do. Um, and I'm not my brother's keeper. Like if I see something wrong, but it doesn't impact me, then I'll just let other people deal with it. Um, so like that's kind of the sentiment people bring to it, and it just like kind of was eye opening to me that like there's a disconnect between like the touristy side of Amsterdam, but that's really the identity. But then you have the population that doesn't really connect with their identity
Yeah.
as a city, but you still have the people not caring enough to do anything about changing the identity that Amsterdam has around the entire world.
It's almost like
Uh,
if like the US's identity was Las Vegas Strip.
um,
Is that a similar correlation or no? If like that's what people knew US for, is like, oh, that just because of it's Las Vegas. Well, actually, there's other parts of the country besides the Strip in Las Vegas.
well, the strip in Las Vegas, like the prostitution isn't allowed there, and I think like so it's
A little bit
and
different.
it's not allowed in most countries, so you don't have this thing.
Oh, okay. So okay,
So like
yeah.
it's not like that, but like especially when this reputation is just so widely held by the entire world that the citizens of that country don't agree with, but don't even not agree with it enough to care to change it. And so one of the things that they also said was, well, if it's going to happen anyway, then shouldn't the government find a way to regulate it and look after it? I'm like, that's not a justification for allowing wrong things to happen either. Like people have like that has happened in the US is like there's been legalization in some states for harder drugs. It's like that doesn't you can't go throughout life with the the proclivity that, oh, if people are going to do it anyway, then we should just allow it to happen. Like no, like that's that's just not the way I
Yeah.
think about things. But like no, you still need to stand up for what is right, and you can't if something's wrong, then you shouldn't be conveying in any way that it is right. And living under the falsehood that it's going to happen either way, um, is like not how I would do it. So I told him it's kind of like the US, how people, um, the people and lobbyists still go for like automatic rifles and saying like, oh, if we legalize guns and legalize automatic assault weapons, then then bad people will still find a way to get their hands on it and still carry out these shootings. And I'm like, we don't know that to be true. Like it's legal right now. Why are people so against changing something that could help people, and like creating a little bit more protection around something that could help people greatly.
Mhm.
Um, sure, bad people might be able to still get their hands on automatic weapons, but why do we as a society just cast that completely to the side and say, oh, well, we're not even going to try. We're just going to allow school shootings to continue to happen. We're just going to allow crowded areas to be under harm and people to be in worry. Like, why like I guess I use that example. Um, but I mean
Yeah.
that,
No, I get it. Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's good. And I'm glad to hear that. The
Mhm.
country sounds like the people in the country, they sound like they're good people, and sounds like a pretty cool place outside of that area.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful country. Went to a few other towns and
Tell me
did a
about
lot.
Monaco though. Was Monaco pretty sweet? I know they're one of the wealthiest per capita. A lot
Oh
of
yeah, I
like
mean
pretty obvious or what?
yeah, it was just a bubble of like wealth.
Like a square mile, right?
I don't know how big, definitely tiny, but it's like geographically, it's enclosed in from Spain, or not Spain, from Italy and from France. Um, but yeah, there's just so much money there that it seems fake, and it like you want to think it's like it feels like this like utopian
Oh
place where
wow.
there's like gold lined sidewalks and Bugattis parked everywhere and all these people, and it's like you're there and it's like what is going on, and like people coming back from shopping with their Louis Vuitton and whatever, and
Yeah,
um so it was cool, but it just like it did not feel real, and it was quite literally a bubble in every sense of the word.
hmm.
uh,
Wasn't it's not like that way of life isn't sustainable on a very large scale. Like it has to be a small group of people.
yeah, yeah, I mean I don't like I don't know what to think of it. Like definitely cool. Like I definitely think it's fun to go back to, but I think you can't act like that's like a real place. Like it's just not.
That's funny.
So it but yeah, it was definitely neat. Like cool cars, nice buildings, very clean.
Yeah,
Um, saw where the race course was, lots of fancy boats. Um, but just the amount of just the constant display of wealth was, um, or the illusion of wealth, um, for sure. And I think in Monaco, like it's not an illusion of wealth. I'll back up. It definitely is wealth. Like like if
Legit
you're driving a
billionaire.
200 if
Yeah,
you're driving a 200-foot yacht, then like that's kind of hard to have an illusion, but it's just like it was pretty crazy.
yeah,
So
cool.
what do you think of your travels?
Um, I thought it was I had a great time. I went with Kayla. We went to Cabo and we're in Cabo for five days, and it was awesome. You know, didn't have to use the credit card at all. Just showed up, and the company had like completely took care of everything. It was an all-inclusive resort, and it was like the first resort I was at that had like a living room and a kitchen, and like a separate bedroom and everything, and it was like it felt like
Hmm.
an apartment I was living in, and had like a balcony that wrapped around the side, and it was legit. It was super nice, and um, the resort itself was pretty fun. It's just like, have you ever been to like an all inclusive anything before?
No.
So it's weird ordering something and then just not getting a check, like not getting a receipt, not having to do anything. They're just like, okay. And then like they'll give it to you. And then it's like, it's done. Like that's the transaction. Um,
Mhm.
it's just weird, like not, you know, like not tipping out. And you can, you can tip out waiters and waitresses, but
Mhm.
it's not designed for that. And it was crazy. I had a good time and I had a really fun time and it was fun just being around. And additionally, we did some really cool stuff like went camelback riding on the beach, went ATV riding, like hung out by the pool. There were some business meetings in the mornings that were fun and um Kayla and I had the chance to speak at one of them, which is cool. We were recognized for some stuff. So, yeah, all in all, it was a great time.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, us just doing a summer vacation, I guess.
Yeah, that was 100% what it was. And
Uh,
um, I don't get it. Some people, I'll tell you what some people did. Some people, they like after the meetings, those afternoons, they would have Zoom meetings with like clients or like potential people that were interested in the business. And to me, I'm like, dude, you're on vacation. Like, can you enjoy the vacation? Like, you're in
mhm.
Cabo. Like, you don't need to be doing a Zoom meeting like today. Like, when you're working, work. When you're vacationing, vacation. And
Yeah,
don't mix the two.
yeah,
For me, I was just like, dang, like I felt bad for them. I'm like,
yeah,
you went all the way here. Like, don't go back to your room and do a Zoom meeting. Like, I don't know.
yeah, yeah. So one of our good friends, Ben, he was saying like, man, sometimes I just wish like I'd be okay with lying on the couch for the entire weekend just so I could just like sit and rest. And I wish I could like just enjoy that. But I feel like if I do that, then I feel like I just wasted 2 days and I get anxious that I wasted 2 days. And I go, yeah, Ben, you would waste 2 days if you were to just sit on the couch all day. And he's like, well, some people can just do that and like that's what they want to do. And I'm like, Ben, to have that as like the peak of enjoyment as something that they do for fun is just like sit nonstop for 48 hours. Like our goal is to like expand,
Mhm.
like just to live life. Like sitting on a couch for 2 days straight is not living. Like if you don't have a problem with that, then there's like then there's a much bigger problem going on. So I told him like hopefully you feel like you wasted 2 days. Um, but like I no, I think I agree. Like work when you're working, play when you're playing. But
Yeah. Well, anytime
like
longer, go ahead.
I think that just from what I was trying to say is just like go live life to the full, right?
Hmm.
Whatever you're
Yeah.
doing, just
And
live it.
the goal obviously isn't to do that full time, nor like I think there's like almost like diminishing returns to being there because like you max out like just about everything you can do in probably like 3 or 4 days. And if you're there longer, it's just more of the same. And it reminds me, there's this cruise that left Florida, and it's a 3-year cruise. And the goal, it's a 3-year cruise, and the goal is for people to never have to leave it. And the plan is for the cruise to just go around the world and for you to never have to get off. And that sounds like a freaking nightmare to me.
Yeah, yeah,
Like in the movie Wall-E, how like they have like the utopia in the sky where like everyone's fat and obese and just watches TV and like goes around on
mm-hmm,
their little electric wheelchairs. Uh,
mm-hmm,
like same kind of energy when like a cruise that doesn't end. Um, like imagine your associations of people that are there. Imagine like the people that are influencing how you think and
mm-hmm,
what you believe and like all that, dude. It scares me. So
mm-hmm.
going off that, like I agree with Ben, the goal isn't to sit on the couch or to sit in front of a TV or to sit on the beach. I think you have to be challenging yourself. You have to be growing either physically or mental. There has to be some kind of resistance, like some kind of challenge that you're trying to get through. So I'm the same way.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, for sure. Um, yeah, kind of like Monaco or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Like I think it's uh it's nice to take a break from things sometimes, but like it's not real, you know.
Mhm.
So that being said, um, it's good to be back in the United States for me and for you, and like there's periods of life when you're resting, and then there's also periods when you're getting after it. And I
One
find
quick
myself,
thing, one
yeah.
one one quick thing I'll share. And then I know we got to bounce. We both have prior commitments, but one quick thing I'll share, and I actually heard this in Cabo, from a gentleman who's at about $500,000 a year in income, and he shared that, like Lincoln's story of like, if I had 5 hours to cut down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe.
Hmm.
And there has to be like parts where you're sharpening your axe, and then parts of like actually cutting down the tree. And like even in seven habits of highly effective people, one of the habits is like sharpening the saw. Um,
Hmm.
so how he sees sharpening the axe or sharpening the saw is those breaks of being able to relax, reset, clear your mind, like maybe have a new experience, be able to just not focus as much on the business and just kind of reset. And he says that's sharpening the saw. And then that allows you to go back to work and hit it harder with more intention, maybe a new perspective, be able to, be back into it, sharper. So I really like that mindset and, drawing a correlation between the two.
Hmm. Yeah, but yeah, for sure. And I think I'll say one point, then I'll wrap it up. One thing that I learned or realized when I was in Europe is just that you need to play your own game, right? Like you can't be trying to play somebody else's game. Um, like there's no reason to play somebody else's game, right? Don't like when we were in Monaco, I just thought that like we, Haley and I, like I put my $100 down at the blackjack table, and like people are putting down 10x, 100x more at different tables. And then like we went and got some appetizers and a drink, and then there's people coming in with bags and bags of shopping, and people walking out of the Rolex store or whatever with new watches, and it's just like, no, like you got to play your own game. Like there's no reason to get caught up in what people are doing, or people aren't doing, but like live your own life. um and I think that's true when you are cutting down the tree too. Not just when you're sharpening the saw, but when you're cutting down the tree, you got to play your own game. You can't be worried about what other game people are playing. So
Yeah,
um, that's
important. Yeah, it can't be somebody else's tree.
yeah, yeah. Cut your own tree.
Hey, cut your own damn tree. Sweet man. Well, good chat. Good recap. Glad we could get this going, and we'll be a little bit more consistent. Make sure at least get another pod in here in July. Worst case scenario, one more in July, and keep it going. And we'll have more adventures to come. I know you got some trips coming up. I'm going to Colorado next week, see the rents, and we'll keep enjoying our summer and keep growing from there. But yeah, that's what we got. Any final words, Senor?
Nope.
All done. All right. Goodbye, y'all.